Crash landing and first contact. The cargo transport shuddered violently as it broke apart in Viridian 7's atmosphere. Maya Chen gripped her seat harness, watching through the viewport as pieces of hull plating tore away like paper in a storm. She was a maintenance engineer, not a pilot. But none of that mattered now. The emergency pod ejected automatically, spinning wildly as it plummeted toward the green and purple canopy below. Impact came hard and fast. The pod smashed through layers of thick vegetation, branches scraping against the hull like claws on metal. When everything finally stopped moving, Maya sat in darkness, ears ringing, ribs screaming with pain. She ran a quick self-check by touch. Arms worked, legs responded, head was still attached. The gash along her left arm was bleeding but not arterial. She would live, at least for now. Maya triggered the pod's emergency release and stumbled out into humid air so thick it felt like breathing soup. The jungle around her pulsed with life. Bioluminescent fungi dotted the trees, casting everything in an eerie violet glow. Sounds echoed from every direction. Clicks and whistles and deep rumbling calls that made her instinctively reach for a weapon she didn't have. Her tool belt had survived the crash, still hanging at her waist with various maintenance instruments. Not much good against whatever made those sounds, but better than nothing. She salvaged what she could from the pod: emergency rations, medical kit, water purification tablets, and most importantly, her maintenance visor. The device was standard issue for engineers working in tight spaces. A heads-up display unit with motion sensors, thermal imaging, and a basic translation database. Maya had modified hers extensively, adding holographic projection capabilities and expanded sensor range. She pulled it on, and the familiar weight settled against her temples. The display flickered to life, running diagnostics. 78% functional. Good enough. Maya started walking, following what her sensors indicated was a slight downward slope. Water would be downhill, and water meant a better chance of survival. She had made it perhaps 50 meters when she realized she was being followed. The thermal display showed 3 heat signatures moving parallel to her path, staying just outside visual range. They were medium-sized, quadrupedal, and definitely tracking her movements with purpose. She stopped walking and the signatures stopped too. When she moved again, they matched her pace. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Predators almost certainly, but their behavior was odd. They weren't closing in for a kill, just watching. She slowly turned her head, and that was when she saw them. 3 creatures emerged from the undergrowth, moving with fluid grace despite their youth. They stood roughly waist-high to Maya, built like a cross between a large cat and something reptilian. 4 powerful legs supported sleek bodies covered in scales that shifted colors with the ambient light. But their eyes were what caught her attention. Crystalline structures that reflected the bioluminescent glow like multifaceted gems. These were juveniles, Maya realized. Young ones separated from their pack or still learning to hunt. The largest of the 3, its scales patterned with dark stripes, approached cautiously. Maya remained still, hands visible and empty. The creature tilted its head, studying her with obvious intelligence. It made a sound, a series of melodic chirps that her visor attempted to translate. The software struggled. These were juvenile vocalizations, not in its limited database, but it caught fragments. Curiosity, question, unknown thing. Maya slowly crouched down, making herself less threatening. She activated her visor's holographic display, projecting a simple light pattern into the air between them. The 3 cubs froze, eyes tracking the floating shapes with intense focus. The smallest one, barely larger than a house cat, edged closer and tried to bat at the hologram with one paw. When its limb passed through the light, it jumped back, then tried again, clearly fascinated. The striped leader made another sound, this one directed at Maya. Her visor translated it better this time. Safe? Question? Friend? Maya pulled an emergency ration bar from her pack, broke it into 3 pieces and placed them on the ground between them. The cubs exchanged glances, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Then the smallest one darted forward, grabbed a piece and retreated to a safe distance before nibbling cautiously. Its eyes widened and it made an excited chirping sound. The other 2 quickly claimed their shares. While they ate, Maya noticed the blood. The middle cub, one with lighter coloring, had injuries across its flank, parallel claw marks that looked recent. All 3 showed signs of stress, their scales flickering through agitated color patterns. They were lost or displaced, separated from their pack and vulnerable. As if summoning her thoughts into reality, a deep roar echoed through the jungle. The cubs' scales immediately shifted to dark, muted tones, camouflage instinct kicking in. They huddled closer together, eyes wide with fear. The roar came again, closer this time, and Maya's sensors picked up a massive heat signature moving through the undergrowth, approximately 200 meters away and closing. The striped cub looked at Maya, then at the direction of the approaching threat, then back to Maya. It made a decision. The cub grabbed Maya's pant leg gently in its jaws and tugged, urgency clear in every movement. Its siblings were already moving, heading away from the roar at a swift pace but stopping every few meters to look back and make sure Maya was following. Maya did not need a translator to understand. Run now, questions later. She followed the cubs as they led her through the jungle, taking paths that seemed random but were clearly chosen with purpose. They moved through dense thickets that would slow larger predators, across streams that would break scent trails, and finally into a network of caves carved into a rocky hillside. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for Maya to squeeze through, but it opened into a larger chamber inside. The cubs had clearly been using this as a shelter. There were signs of occupation, bones from previous meals, a nest of soft plant material in one corner. Maya collapsed against the cave wall, breathing hard, ribs protesting every inhale. The three cubs positioned themselves near the entrance, not blocking it, but clearly watching. The smallest one came back to Maya and curled up against her side, seeking comfort or offering it. Maybe both. She carefully placed a hand on its head and it leaned into the touch, purring with a sound like distant thunder. Outside, something massive moved past the cave entrance. Maya held her breath. The cubs went absolutely still, not even their scales moving. After an eternity, the presence moved on, the sounds of its passage fading into the jungle's ambient noise. Maya looked down at the three young creatures who had chosen to help a strange alien rather than abandon her to the jungle's dangers. They had no reason to trust her, no reason to lead her to their shelter. But they had done it anyway. She adjusted her visor, studying the cubs through the sensor display. The device was designed to help her understand machines, but maybe, just maybe, it could help her understand these creatures too. And maybe, in return, she could teach them something valuable. The longest night of Maya's life was just beginning, but she was not alone. That had to count for something. The lesson of Vigilance Dawn arrived slowly on Viridian 7, the light filtering through the cave entrance in shades of amber and rose. Maya woke to find all three cubs asleep in a pile near the entrance, their breathing synchronized, scales glowing faintly with the bioluminescence they seemed to absorb from their environment. She checked her visor's chronometer. She had been on this planet for approximately 18 hours, and already her entire survival depended on three juvenile aliens who should have been with their families. Her arm throbbed beneath the emergency bandage she had applied during the night. The wound was clean but would need better treatment soon. Water was the immediate priority. Maya accessed her visor's sensors and detected moisture deeper in the cave system. She ventured carefully into the darkness, using thermal imaging to navigate, and found a small underground spring. The water tested clean enough after running it through her purification tablets. She drank deeply and refilled her canteen. When she returned to the main chamber, the cubs were awake and chittering among themselves. The striped leader approached her, and Maya noticed how it moved with a slight limp, favoring its right foreleg. She knelt down and gestured to the leg. The cub hesitated, then allowed her to examine it. There was swelling around the joint, probably from running through rough terrain. Maya had anti-inflammatory gel in her medical kit, designed for humans but hopefully compatible enough to help. She applied it carefully, and the cub made a surprised chirping sound as the cooling sensation took effect. The smallest cub brought her something, dropping it at her feet with obvious pride. It was a fruit, round and heavy, with tough skin that split to reveal pale flesh inside. Maya's visor scanned it and confirmed it was non-toxic to human biochemistry. She smiled and accepted the gift, sharing pieces with all three cubs. They ate together in the growing light, an odd family bound by circumstance and mutual need. Over the next several days, a routine established itself. The cubs would venture out to hunt or forage, always returning with enough to share. Maya worked on extending her sensor range and improving the visor's translation capabilities. By recording the cubs' vocalizations and building a basic lexicon, she learned their names, or at least her interpretation of them. The striped leader was Zephyra, the injured one who led with courage despite fear. The light-colored middle cub was Kieran, quick and clever, always finding the best paths through difficult terrain. The smallest was Nyx, curious about everything and fearless in ways that were both admirable and concerning. But Maya noticed something troubling. The cubs were becoming complacent about safety. They would leave the cave entrance unguarded, all three heading out together or sleeping at the same time. In their natural pack structure, adults would maintain constant vigilance, but these juveniles had no adult guidance. They were vulnerable and did not fully realize it. One evening, as predatory sounds grew closer to their cave, Maya made a decision. She gathered the three cubs and activated her visor's holographic display. She projected a simple image, a representation of the cave entrance with a glowing figure standing watch. Then she showed what happened when the entrance was unguarded, simulating a predator entering while everyone slept. The cubs watched with rapt attention, their crystalline eyes reflecting the light show. Maya used gestures and simple words that her visor translated. One watches always, one protects while others rest. She demonstrated by taking position near the entrance, her visor's motion sensors active, scanning the jungle beyond. After a few minutes, she called Zephyra over and placed the visor on the cub's head. It was comically oversized, but the display was still visible to the cub's multiple eyes. Zephyra stood very still, processing the flood of information from the sensors. Maya guided the cub's attention to the motion tracking feature, showing how it detected movement in the darkness. She made it a game, tossing small stones into the bushes outside and letting Zephyra track them on the display. The cub's scales rippled with excited colors as understanding dawned. Then Maya took back the visor and gave it to Kieran, repeating the lesson. Each cub got a turn, learning what the sensors could do and how they extended awareness beyond natural senses. But the device was not the point, Maya realized. The point was the concept. Watch duty, sentinel responsibility, the understanding that safety required constant vigilance. She established a rotation. One cub would take position near the entrance, not necessarily wearing the visor but maintaining alertness, while the others rested or went about other activities. After a set period, they would switch. Maya used her visor's timer to signal rotations at first, but the cubs quickly developed their own sense of timing. They began to take the duties seriously, competing to see who could spot potential threats first, who could maintain focus longest without distraction. Nyx, despite being the smallest, proved to have the sharpest hearing. Kieran excelled at pattern recognition, noticing when the jungle's ambient sounds changed in ways that indicated danger. Zephyra had the strongest presence, the ability to project authority that would make predators think twice about approaching. On the seventh night, their training proved its value. Kieran was on watch when he detected something approaching. He did not panic or cry out, instead following the protocol Maya had taught. He woke Zephyra with a specific touch pattern they had developed, then moved to wake Maya while Zephyra took defensive position. By the time Maya had her visor on and sensors active, all three cubs were ready and coordinated. The threat was a pack of 6 adult Kethrin from a rival territory, their scales dark with aggressive patterns. They were larger than the cubs by a significant margin, and their body language radiated hostility. Maya's visor translated fragments of their vocalizations. They were demanding the cubs leave this territory, claiming the cave system as their own. But more than that, they saw the cubs as potential future competition, young ones who should be driven off before they could grow strong. Maya stepped forward, placing herself between the cubs and the adults. She activated her visor's holographic projector at maximum intensity, filling the cave entrance with brilliant, shifting patterns of light. The adult Kethrin recoiled, confused by the display. Maya projected images of much larger creatures, phantom guardians that did not exist but appeared real enough in the darkness. She amplified her voice through the visor's speakers, distorting it to sound deeper, more threatening. But the real defense came from the cubs themselves. They did not cower or scatter. Instead, they formed a coordinated line behind Maya, each taking a position they had practiced during watch rotations. They moved as a unit, scales synchronized in warning colors, vocalizing in harmony to create a sound much larger than 3 juveniles should be able to produce. They had learned from Maya's lessons, but they had also added their own instincts, their own adaptations. The adult Kethrin were faced with something unexpected. This was not a cowering group of lost cubs. This was an organized, alert defensive unit that showed coordination and awareness beyond their years. The element of surprise was gone, the easy victory they had anticipated replaced with uncertainty. After several tense minutes, the adults backed down. It was not worth the potential cost. They withdrew into the jungle, leaving the cave unclaimed. As the sound of their departure faded, Maya felt her legs go weak. She sat down hard, adrenaline draining away. The cubs gathered around her, chittering excitedly, scales flashing through colors that her visor translated as triumph and relief. They had defended their territory, their home, their pack. Because that was what they had become, Maya realized. A pack unlikely and strange, but real nonetheless. Zephyra carefully picked up the visor where Maya had set it down and brought it to her. But instead of handing it over, the cub placed it on the ground, equidistant between all four of them. The gesture was clear. This belonged to all of them now, a shared tool, a shared responsibility. Maya looked at these three young creatures who had learned so quickly, who had taken her simple lessons about watch duty and transformed them into something profound. They understood now that survival required more than strength or speed. It required awareness, coordination, and the willingness to stand together when threats emerged. She pulled the visor back on and accessed its recording functions. Everything they had learned, all the protocols and patterns, she began documenting it all. Not for herself, but for them. Because eventually, rescue would come and she would have to leave. But what she had taught them could remain, could spread, could become something lasting. The cubs settled into their rotation naturally, Nyx taking the next watch while Zephyra and Kieran rested. Maya watched them and felt something shift in her chest. She had crashed on this planet expecting to die. Instead, she had found purpose in the most unexpected place, teaching vigilance to young predators who would carry those lessons forward. Outside, Viridian 7's jungle continued its eternal symphony of life and death. But inside the cave, four beings from different worlds had created something new, a tradition born from necessity, grown through trust and sustained by the simple understanding that watching over each other mattered more than anything else. Legacy. Across the stars, 2 months passed before the rescue ship finally located Maya's emergency beacon. By then, the rainy season had arrived on Viridian 7, transforming the jungle into a waterlogged maze where every surface dripped and mist hung heavy in the air. The cubs had grown, not quite adolescents, but no longer the frightened juveniles Maya had first encountered. Their coordination had evolved beyond anything she had specifically taught them. They communicated through subtle scale color shifts and precise body language, operating as a seamless unit during their watch rotations. Maya had documented everything in her visor's memory banks. The protocols they had developed, the communication methods, the way responsibility rotated not by rigid schedule but by intuitive understanding of each other's strengths and fatigue levels. She had watched them teach these concepts to other young Kethryn they encountered, cubs from different family groups who were drawn to the organized, confident way Zephyra, Kieran, and Nyx conducted themselves. The rescue ship's approach sent the cubs into high alert. They had never seen human technology on this scale. The orbital shuttle descending through clouds with thrusters burning bright against the gray sky. Maya stood at the cave entrance, torn between relief at rescue and grief at departure. The landing team emerged in environmental suits, med scanners already sweeping her for injuries. They were efficient and professional, ready to extract her and return to the ship within the hour. But Maya made them wait. She gathered the 3 cubs one final time, kneeling in the mud of their shared home. Zephyra approached first, scales rippling through colors that Maya's visor translated as understanding mixed with sorrow. The cub knew what the ship meant, knew that their pack was about to break apart. Maya removed her visor slowly, feeling its weight leave her temples for the last time. The device had been modified so extensively over the months that it barely resembled standard equipment anymore. She had integrated Kethryn vocal patterns into its translation matrix, added subroutines optimized for their sensory processing, and encoded every lesson and protocol into its teaching database. It was no longer just her tool. It had become something designed specifically for them. She placed the visor on Zephyra's head, adjusting the fit as best she could. The cub stood perfectly still, understanding the significance of this moment. Maya spoke slowly, letting the visor translate her words into the melodic chirps and rumbles of Kethrin language. This is yours now. Keep watch. Teach others. Remember that staying alert together keeps everyone safe. Kieran and Nyx pressed close, their scales touching Zephyra's in what Maya had learned was a gesture of unity and support. The three of them stood together, a formation they had practiced countless times during watch rotations, with the visor now marking Zephyra as first sentinel, leader of their small but growing movement. The rescue team was getting impatient, their captain making pointed comments about weather windows and orbital windows. Maya touched each cub one final time, committing their unique scale patterns to memory. Then she turned and walked toward the shuttle, not looking back because looking back would make leaving impossible. The ascent through Viridian 7's atmosphere was smooth and routine. The med team treated her injuries minor now after months of natural healing. They debriefed her on the crash, documented her survival methods, and seemed mildly interested in her notes about indigenous species cooperation. Just another rescued engineer with a tale of survival, nothing that would make it beyond the routine incident reports. Maya said nothing about what she had really left behind. Not just a visor, but a seed, an idea that could grow into something much larger than anyone anticipated. 3 years passed. Maya returned to her work, designing environmental systems for colony ships, a job that felt hollow after months of immediate, tangible purpose. She followed news from Viridian 7 when she could find it, which was not often. The planet remained classified as minimally contacted, visited only by scientific survey teams and cultural observers operating under strict, non-interference protocols. Then the reports started appearing in xenoanthropology journals. Observer teams had noted unusual behavioral developments among Kethrin populations across multiple territories. Young Kethrin were forming what researchers termed sentinel groups, coordinated watch rotations with clear protocols and communication standards. The behavior was spreading rapidly, jumping between family groups and even across traditional territorial boundaries. Most remarkably, many of these young sentinels wore crude replicas of some kind of device on their heads. The devices were non-functional, made from woven plant fibers, carved wood, or shaped stone. But they were clearly modeled after something with a distinctive shape that appeared consistent across widely separated populations. Researchers were puzzled. This was not traditional Kethrin cultural expression. It had appeared suddenly within the last few years and was propagating through juvenile populations faster than any previously observed behavioral adaptation. Maya read the reports with her heart pounding. She accessed restricted databases using her engineering credentials and found surveillance imagery from Viridian 7's northern continent. There, in images captured by orbital monitors, she saw them. Young Kethrin standing watch at territory boundaries, at water sources, at gathering sites, and many wore head decorations that, even in low-resolution images, were unmistakably modeled after her visor. The original was still in use, the reports confirmed. One particular group in the Northern Territories possessed what appeared to be actual technology, a device far beyond Kethrin manufacturing capability. This group, led by a mature female with distinctive striped scale patterns, operated the most organized sentinel network on the planet. They trained other groups, spreading techniques and protocols that were revolutionizing how Kethrin approached territorial security and resource management. Maya requested transfer to the Viridian 7 research station, citing her previous experience on the planet and unique understanding of Kethrin behavior. Her request was approved, though with strict conditions. She would observe only, document but not interfere, and absolutely not make direct contact with her previous companions. She lasted exactly 2 days following those rules. On the third morning, she left the research compound alone, hiking into the Northern Territories guided by coordinates she had memorized years ago. The jungle had changed with seasons and growth, but the cave system was still there, expanded now into a larger complex. Sentinels spotted her before she reached the entrance. Young Kethrin, adolescents now, emerged from concealment with coordinated precision. They did not attack, instead forming a perimeter and signaling back toward the cave. Maya stood still, hands visible, and waited. Zephyra emerged into the sunlight, now fully grown and magnificent. The striped patterns had deepened with maturity, and battle scars marked her scales, evidence of conflicts defended and victories earned. She wore the visor, battered and repaired many times over but still functional, The device looked small on her adult head, but it sat there with the weight of authority and tradition. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the space of years and change. Then Zephyra made a sound, deep and resonant, that needed no translation. She remembered. The visor came off, and Zephyra brought it to Maya not as a return but as a showing. "Look what we have done with your gift." Maya accessed the device's memory logs and saw years of recordings, hundreds of young Kethrin learning Sentinel protocols, territory disputes resolved through coordinated awareness rather than violence, resource-sharing agreements negotiated because groups could maintain security without claiming exclusive access, predator attacks anticipated and defended against through network communication. The visor had become more than a teaching tool. It had become a symbol of a new way of being Kethrin, a way that valued collective awareness over individual strength, cooperation over competition. The crude replicas worn by Sentinels across the planet were not just decoration. They were declarations of identity, markers of belonging to something larger than family groups or territories. Kieran emerged from the cave network, followed by Nyx. Both had grown into powerful adults, each leading their own Sentinel groups but clearly maintaining close coordination with Zephyra's primary network. They greeted Maya with the same mix of recognition and reserved dignity. No longer the playful cubs she remembered, but mature leaders of a movement that had transformed their species' social structure. That evening, Maya sat with them as sunset painted the jungle in familiar colors. Young Sentinels came and went, receiving instruction, reporting observations, participating in the constant flow of information that kept the network functioning. Maya watched them pass the visor between groups, letting different Sentinels wear it during their training, ensuring everyone understood its capabilities and limitations. Zephyra communicated through a combination of vocalizations and the visor's translation software, now sophisticated enough to handle adult Kethrin language with impressive accuracy. She explained how Sentinel networks had prevented 3 major territorial wars in the past year alone, how resource conflicts were identified early and mediated before they escalated, how young Kethrin from rival families now trained together, forming bonds that transcended old hostilities. The Galactic Council had noticed. Official delegations were requesting meetings with Kethrin Sentinel leaders, trying to understand how a species classified as primitive had developed such sophisticated organizational structures. Trade negotiations were opening, cultural exchanges being proposed. Viridian 7 was no longer a backwater world to be studied from orbit. It was becoming a voice in the larger galactic community, and that voice spoke with the coordinated purpose of Sentinels who understood that awareness and cooperation created strength that raw power never could. Maya stayed on Viridian 7, officially as a research liaison, but actually as something much simpler. She was Pack, had always been Pack, and Pack did not abandon each other. She helped modify the visor, working with Zephyra to adapt it for different users and training scenarios. She documented the Sentinel protocols, working with xenoanthropologists to understand the cultural revolution she had accidentally sparked. Years later, when human colonies started adopting modified Sentinel watch systems based on Kethrin models, when military academies taught coordination protocols derived from observations of Viridian 7 Sentinel networks, when the Galactic Council formally recognized the Kethrin Sentinel Federation as an independent political entity, Maya would think back to that first night in the cave. 3 terrified cubs and 1 injured engineer, finding safety in each other and accidentally creating something that would ripple across the stars. The galaxy was vast and often cold, but it was also full of moments where understanding could bridge impossible gaps, where a simple lesson about staying alert could transform into a tradition, where a maintenance visor could become the symbol of an entire civilization's evolution. Zephyra still wore that original visor during formal occasions, now more ceremonial than functional. But every young Kethrin Sentinel who wore a replica understood what it represented. Not human technology or alien wisdom, but the simple truth that watching over each other, staying aware together, and coordinating for mutual protection were not signs of weakness but foundations of strength. Maya had crashed on Viridian 7 expecting to die alone. Instead, she had helped birth a legacy that would outlive her by generations. The engineer's gift, they called it in Kethrin histories, though Maya always maintained the gift had gone both ways. She had taught them vigilance, They had taught her that family could be built from circumstance and choice, that pack was not about species or origin, but about choosing to stand watch together when darkness fell. And across Viridian 7, as night descended and sentinels took their positions, the tradition continued, one watching while others rested, always alert, always coordinated, always remembering that their strength came not from individual power, but from the bonds they chose to honor. The galaxy had learned that lesson from them, and it would not be forgotten.